gonna do this tablet. And you're all set. You guys out. All right, and now when you want to go, you're gonna do the drop down here, and it'll be live stream.
Okay, we're down.
No, not now. When you're done with the meeting.
Okay.
Yep, you're good.
All right, we're all set.
Okay, so let's bring the meeting to order. Spot on time, or a minute or two early, which is awesome. I guess we should do a roll call. I'm not sure how we do that.
Mike Stevenson,
Here,
Nick McGee.
Here.
And Allison Bristol.
Here.
All right. And myself.
yay. And I did ask Tody offline if she'd take the minutes. Sorry to burden you, but thank you. A quick review on the charge. I think there was a couple of emails backwards and forwards about a bunch of things precipitated by me. And so I apologize if I caused any disconcern or confusion. But I think we got an email yesterday from Susan Hamill, who's a regular contributor to all things happening in the town. And I think the charge as it stands right now is to recommend whether or not any of these questions or observations that we discuss should go forward to the main committee or the committee as a whole. My only cautious thought there is that if we get, I think historically we've seen lots of things come in towards the end of the process. So I think if we've made a decision one way or the other, it might be a little premature. I don't know what you guys think about that. I think if we agree that it should go forward to the main committee, I don't see that necessarily being an issue. But if there's something that we feel shouldn't go to the committee, and then there's overwhelming comment from, you know, people around the town, we might have to rethink that. That was my only thought when I saw Susan's email. Any thoughts? Fire away, Nick.
You want us to raise hands?
Okay.
Well, my only thought is, I think, Mike, what you're saying is appropriate, and it's consistent with, you know, the how the town operates, that, you know, you'll have ordinances is the thing I pay most attention to in the pipeline through committee. And, you know, people can pay attention or not pay attention, and then they go to council. But if there is pushback with what the ordinance committee has brought forward, you know, then they can always go back to committee. So I don't think we should slow our work down, you know, to be overly concerned. It's not that we don't want the public to participate, you know, but always sooner is better than later. But I know from Susan's email that she was saying it's going to take her some time to pull her thoughts together, which is good. You know, you'd rather have something thought through. But you know, I don't think we can really, you know, if our charge is to try to have something to council by the end of March or early April for a June referendum, which is my understanding, then, you know, I think we just have to proceed, and hopefully we'll get comments from the public, you know, earlier that rather than later in the process. I also had a question about our timeline, because I noticed in the council goals for this year, they are putting referendum in November at the latest. So I don't know if that changes our timeline at all.
It probably will, but I'm sure that the council will want you to stay on track as much as you can.
Okay.
But there, you have a wiggle room. You do have a wiggle room, yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Nick.
Yeah, so my general thoughts on our process is I think us as a subcommittee, I think we're supposed to make a recommendation to the fuller committee. And I think that includes specific language change. and I say that is because once we get it into the larger committee group, I think we need, I don't want to have open-ended questions. What I want to have is solid language that we discuss and debate. And so, if it's, if it's the salary issue, I think we should come out with a number for the larger committee to chew on. And then, and as it relates to public comment piece of this, you have to remember at the end of the day, we're only making recommended changes to the council. Council's going to go through their process of opening public hearings, and any pushback they get either from the public or thoughts of their own, they will at that point either adjust the language we've recommended, or they'll probably force us back into subcommittee or, as a full committee to go discuss a change or a possible change that may have come through from the public that we hadn't, digested yet. So I think what we should try to stay is specific. We should try to propose the language. We should, as a fuller committee, we should recommend the changes and then let that process play out. So kind of take care of our little square, and they may send us back to the drawing table multiple times for all we know. But I think at the end of the day, let's get them a refined document to debate specifically rather than leave a bunch of loose, open-ended questions. That's my take on it.
Okay. Nick did raise a point, I think just before you joined, Alison, that my tracker spreadsheet that I updated with the questions for our subcommittee didn't include any of his, which I put down to the fact that I'd used one of Liam's lists that was published before Nick sent his suggestions in. Given that we're not going to cover everything today, I think my thought is that if we plow through the tracker sheet as it stands, and then I'll update it, Nick, after this with incorporating yours in there, and we can treat them, at the next meeting, if that's acceptable to you guys.
Is your tracker sheet in the Google folder? I haven't seen that.
It's not, and I had a technical question for, I don't know if Tody or Liam. I went in and I'm not 100% sure how to upload, which might be a user error on my end. But I noticed that the managers of the Google Drive were just the people at Town Hall, and I didn't know if that affected our ability to go in and submit the documents.
No, you should be able to submit it.
I should be able to submit
You
it.
should
Okay.
be, any of the committee members should be able to go in and upload any documents.
All right, I'll spend a YouTube video time on how to. So, yeah.
I have to do the same thing, Nick, so don't feel bad.
I think I do too. And to answer your question, Alison, the tracker and what I extracted from Liam's document, removing everything to do with questions that we're not addressing, were all sent out by Tody as part of the packet that included the agenda.
Okay. I must have missed that. So, and my laptop has taken the moment to update itself. So I'm a little bit at a loss for looking at things online, but I will look at it for sure.
Nick,
Go ahead, Tody.
if you have issues uploading, I'd be more than happy to upload that document for you. That's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
So shall we just start with item 1 on the tracker? And I can read the question out, and I'm surrounded by paperwork, so I've definitely got the town charter questions extracted from it. The only other thing that I wanted to throw out there, and I think one of the first request that was made by you, Nick, in that first meeting was a copy of the previous charter review proposals, so that we can look back at what sort of things were previously submitted and approved or not. And I do think at some point in time we should, as a group, take a look at that. I haven't done for this particular exercise. Lord knows there's enough paperwork already to try and cross-reference, but I think that was a very smart move to take a look at what we've tried to do historically. And as an example, you'll see that the current salaries for town councillors and the chair, I think was was rejected for change back in 2000. So
Mhm.
those numbers have been around a long time, and clearly there's sensitivity from the town over things like that. But that's just a thought. So let's move on. I think my thought is that we should limit this first meeting to an hour. I don't think we're going to get everything done, but we can get as much done as we can without going beyond that. Yes, Alison?
And forgive me again, I'm not looking at the tracker sheet, but I don't know if anyone watched the council meeting last night, but Councillor Gleisteen actually brought up the idea that at some point this year, the council actually talked about foregoing their salary or their compensation in light of COVID. And I guess because it was in the charter, they can't. So I don't know. I mean, you know, to me, I think they certainly deserve a raise for the time that they put in. But on the flip side of it, if there's sensitivity to it, do we want to put in a provision that they can elect to forego the compensation, you know, if they want to?
My thought there is that given that the process for the actual level of remuneration is in the charter, and therefore it has to go to the town for approval if we want to change it, I just wonder if there's a better way of handling that that would be admissible within the state of Maine charter guidelines, so that instead of actually publishing the number in there, we publish the process for review and get the town to accept that a group of people, a committee, if you like, would approve it, rather than putting the number in there, because it's 20 years old. And whilst I'm sure they'll all tell us that they're not doing it for the money, and I believe that, it still seems ridiculous that they may be putting 20 hours a week in, you know, for effectively $1.50 an hour. You know, if we struggle to have people wanting to be town councillors, then, you know, maybe that's one of the hurdles for us to overcome. But I think that's the thing for the main committee. But I think your point there is well made, Alison. Anybody else got anything on salary?
Yeah, I might, you know, and I understand the idea that they were having trouble foregoing their salary, but I gotta believe there's a mechanism where they could accept their salary and then redonate it back to the town. You know, so as it turns out to be a wash. You know, local food pantry or something of that. You know,
that actually has happened. One of the counselors collected his stipend and then put it back to the town by buying trees for the park. So there was that he because he knew he couldn't forego it. He ended up taking it and put it back into the community.
Right. So yeah, you know, so I guess I'm not as concerned about making sure there's, you know, some provision in there. I think they have options, you know.
Okay. So moving on then. So the first question or observation in the charter is in section 204. And it's a question from Mary Starr. And the question is, what power does this article give to the council? And how does that impact the role of the town manager? And 204, 1, 2, 3, and 4, actually 5, 6, and 7, all covers the enumeration of powers and where the town manager fit relative to everybody else. It seems pretty well documented to me.
I agree. I don't I don't think there's any lack of clarity along what the powers and duties are.
So I mean, at this point in time, Nick, as chair of the full committee, do you think that we should seek further clarification from the sponsor, or just move it forward and make a decision?
I think if it's the wish of this subcommittee that we don't take any action, then that's our recommendation to the full committee, that no adjustments are needed. I think Mary at the full committee level would definitely be able to make an argument that she wanted further clarification, and then the full committee can vote to take it back up or remit it back down to us.
Okay.
That'd be my take on it.
Alison, you got any thoughts on that?
No, I agree.
Okay. So at this point, then, should I propose that we have a motion and we vote on it?
Yes,
Um,
I'll make a motion to table the inquiry from Mary at 404 for further. How do I want to state that? For further review of the enumeration of powers of the council.
So you think we should take it to the full committee?
No, table.
Just leave it as is.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, all right. It's the terminology I'm not familiar with, so
That's okay. And I need a second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Allison Bristol? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Nick McGee
Yes.
and Mike Stevenson.
Yes.
Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you.
The second one is in connection with 206, again from Mary Starr, and it's in conjunction with the induction of town council into office. If I read the short paragraph, councillors elect shall be sworn to the faithful discharge of their duties by the town clerk or the town clerk's designee, and shall assume their duties at the commencement of the second meeting, whether regular, special, or emergency, of the town council following the regular town election. And there's a couple of previous amendments. And Mary's question was, should they be inducted earlier, similar to the school board? Is that legal to do so after the certification process?
Actually, there was a change in the charter on this in that both the board member, the newly elected officials were sworn in at the second meeting. They changed it so that as soon as the council or the charter commission changed it at the request of the board, if I'm not mistaken, that as soon as the election results were certified, board members would be sworn in prior to the council. And the reason being is that they were meeting before the council. Their meetings are scheduled, if you look at the calendar, they're usually scheduled prior to a council meeting. So they felt to get the new members on board quicker that they would prefer their newly elected officials to be sworn in as soon as the certification of the election results were done. So they're actually sworn in probably a week or two prior to the town council. Whereas the town council has always followed, I mean, and it doesn't mean it has to stay that way, but has always been the second meeting following this, oh, my throat's dry, sorry, following the certification of the election results.
I mean, is there any advantage to swearing them in any sooner?
No.
I think, just from my perspective, I don't see a problem with the way it's set up currently. And I know there's as it relates to the council. So I think there is a section about how the school board is sworn in. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I think we just limit this discussion to the council side of it. And I hadn't heard any feedback that the council process is, is not working. I did hear feedback, a couple months ago that the school board side of it might want to review a little bit because of the way their budget works and the voting process and all of that. So, but as far as the council goes, I don't see, I haven't heard any reason for a change in this language.
Allison?
I agree. I don't see any reason to change it.
So let me propose a motion that we table this one.
I'll second it.
Okay.
So far, so easy.
Allison Bristol,
Yes.
Nick McGee,
Yes.
and Mike Stevenson.
Yes.
Okay.
So the third one, this one again from Mary, is in connection with section 207, town council to judge qualifications of its members. The town council shall be the judge of the election and qualification of its members, and for such purpose shall have the power to subpoena witnesses and require production of records. Mary asks, what does this mean and how does this impact the role of the council? Judging qualification of members, could councillors decide that another councillor is not qualified? And there is a second note associated with 207 from Mike Wood, a note referring to validation of vote with reference to the process, or a note that tells readers where the process can be found. Can we deal with those two separately? Because I have some other thoughts in connection with Mike's comment there, because it's a recurring theme throughout the whole of the charter, I think, from Mike. And I've seen this qualification of members in other towns' charters when I was looking around for inspiration. Again, I think it's well documented. Basically, I think that if any of the town council members feels that one of its associated members does not have the qualifications required or declared to do the job, then they can question it. That's my understanding of what it means. Yes, Alison.
I had a question for Tody. Has this ever come into play where the council has questioned the qualifications of a council member?
Not since I've been here, and that's almost 30 years, no.
I mean, I'm not sure that Mary's suggesting it gets removed. You know, I think it's a decent safety net to have. I would hope that if any qualifications were pivotal to a town councillor being appointed, although I guess it's not really an appointment, is it? I mean, with the town votes them in. So I don't even know whether it's relevant.
There is another clause in the charter, or maybe it's the council rules, in that if a counselor does commit a crime, I believe it is, they can be removed. But
That's in the charter.
I do not recall any time in my tenure that this has ever come up.
Well, the only thought that I had, and I didn't think about it until, you know, Mike was talking about it, is that it's kind of, the council, it's kind of self-regulated. So if, I don't know who else would be a judge of qualifications unless you got into, you know, a petition kind of situation. But I don't, you know, like they have, I think it's, I know it's there from the Board of Ed from what we all just went through. But I'm not concerned about this language, but it does kind of bring up the question, does that mean the council is self-regulated? And if it were, you know, not the council that we have that's very open to public, you know, opinion, then is it, you know, does it become kind of insular? So that's the only comment I would have on this.
Any thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a need for a change in this section. I think it's appropriate that the judicial process and authority is outlined under the council, since they are answerable to the public in general through their elections or through a recall process or through the charter, which already establishes how you can be removed for committing crimes and whatnot. So I think the language that currently sits is fine. I don't know if there's an adjustment that needs to be needed there.
Do you want to
And
propose a motion?
Well, I was just going to add that I don't disagree with that, but I think qualification is not just about if you've committed a crime or moral turpitude, which I know is on the table to discuss adding. I think being qualified to be on council with the breadth of issues that the council deals with goes beyond that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the moral turpitude thing is on the agenda for the main committee.
Right.
And I definitely think it needs to be clarified and tightened up, and the whole concept of moral turpitude, if you were to look at it, is a joke. It's a nebulous, and it seems to be more focused on reasons to deport people than anything else. But that's another topic. So I think, and we've got the recall process. So we do have a bunch of different ways of, protecting ourselves from town councillors who are not capable of doing their job and, morally reprehensible. So I think I'm like Nick, really. I don't see any need for change. Does somebody want to table
I'll make a
that
motion to table the first comment.
I'll second that.
Allison Bristol?
We're voting to table, right?
Yes.
Yes, I vote yes.
Nick McGee
Yes.
and Mike Stevenson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, the second comment on 207 is a bit more, I don't know, nebulous is not the right word, but I think what I didn't tackle Mike. I reached out to Mike in connection with some of his points throughout the charter, and I think he's looking for cross-references within the charter so that when you read it and it talks about, in some cases, applicable law, what exactly are those things that are being referred to? And I think this is another one. Not sure that I really understand it.
Without getting too deep into it, I mean, you just got to read the rest of the document. It'd be nice to note where you could find the section on if you don't like something about the judge and election, but I mean, you're just going to keep referencing everywhere. I mean, it's an 18-page document. I think you can find it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting when you look at some of the other charters, they're 2 and 3 times the size of this. And I'm not necessarily sure that makes it a better charter. One could advocate that you start with the bare bones and you improve it as questions come along that you don't have answers within the charter for. But it becomes more unmanageable, I think, sometimes the bigger it gets. So I don't know what we want to do with this. Alison, have you got any thoughts?
No, I think that the language is fine.
I'll make a motion to table.
I'll second it.
Okay. Allison Bristol?
Yes.
Nick McGee?
Yes.
Mike Stevenson?
Yes.
Thank you.
209.1, after councillors elect have been sworn in under section 206, the town council shall elect by majority vote of the entire town council, one of its members for the ensuing year as chair. The town council may fill for an unexpired term any vacancy in the office of chair that may occur. The chair shall preside at the meetings of the town council and shall be recognized as head of the town government for all ceremonial purposes and by the governor for purposes of military law, but shall have no regular administrative duties. And Mike W. threw out a question that says, majority of the entire town council is not a quorum satisfactory.
I will, I can tell you that it's a rare occasion that we don't have a entire council sitting when we are electing a chair. There have been a few instances where we've had 6 members present and they still have elected a chair. So, Nick?
Yeah, and my thought on this is even if it was, even if it was just 6 there or 5 there, you still need, if a majority, the number difference is if you had 5 people there and you have the quote unquote the quorum, the majority would be 3 people. They're just stating here, you should have the 4 to elect your chair. I mean, and by elect, and a majority of the entire town council is 4 votes.
Right.
So if it's 6 people that showed up, they need 4 votes for their chair. 5 people showed up, 4 votes for your chair. And I think that's fine. I mean, that shows especially when you get into talking about chair and leadership, I think it's fair to assume that you should have the 4 votes at a minimum.
Any thoughts, Alison?
I agree.
Then let's motion that to be tabled.
I'll second it.
Okay, Allison Bristol,
Yes.
Nick McGee,
Yes.
and Mike Stevenson.
Yes.
Thank you.
210, quorum and vote. It's similar, if you like, to the previous one, but I'll read it. A majority of the town council shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business, but a smaller number may adjourn from time to time. At least 24 hours notice of the time and place of holding such adjourned meeting shall be given to all members who were not present at the meeting from which the adjournment was taken. Every ordinance, order, and resolve shall require on final passage the affirmative vote of 4 members of the town council. So I think that's very similar to the previous one. And I sort of feel that your logic there, Nick, if it applied to the previous one, probably applies to this one as well. But there were 2 comments. One of them was from me. So here's what I wrote. Here's the issue of, as I see it, a majority constitutes a quorum, and every ordinance, order, and resolve, blah, blah, blah. I just wondered whether there was a possibility that what might be a significant change, ordinance, order, or resolve, might get passed because there wasn't enough people at the meeting. I'm not sure on reflection it really applies if we still need 4.
So I'll just kind of think through your, if it's okay if I jump in real quick, just
Sure.
to think through, I mean, your comment in general. I would say that if they're executing an ordinance, an order, or a resolve, that we're asking that when they do that, they have 4 members, which does constitute a majority of the council. You know, if it's 3 members and there's 1 and, you know, they can't pass the ordinance, you know, even in the situation if they had quorum. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing that, again, we're asking for a majority of the council to be a part of, you know, passing of the ordinance and orders. So that's my 2 cents. I like the number of 4. I mean, and if they you know, show up at a meeting and there's only 4 of them, they have quorum. It just means they'd have to be unanimous in their passing of an ordinance.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess if the 3 people that weren't there were against it, it would still pass. So,
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why I kind of like it, though, with the 4 members there.
Yeah.
So keep in mind also that they have council rules that they have approved. And it also states in the council rules that a majority, which is 4, can call a meeting to adjourn to a date specific. So if they feel uncomfortable on what is currently on the agenda, they have the option of calling that meeting and adjourn it to a date specific. So in reality, they wouldn't have to vote on any of the items. They could table that agenda to another meeting. Now, if there's only 3 people present, they have the right to call the meeting and move it to another date as well. And that's their council rules has that in it. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, do we, just in listening to the discussion, I'm just throwing this out there. I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but do we feel the need at all, given what this year has been like, to define what present means? You know, either live or via,
Really.
you know, electronic meeting or something like that? Or if this is the right place to put it?
Tony, you might be able to help on this. Didn't the state pass language on the state level saying that that electronic meetings and some rules and guidance around it when they issued the emergency powers?
Yeah.
Does this sound right to you?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. I gotta put you on mute real quick. I've got a delivery and I've got to tell.
Yeah. So there was, when the governor issued the emergency proclamation, she did put in, or there was rules around Zoom meetings or how to meet electronically. I know there's some ways now that you can call in if you don't have the capability of doing
Right.
the Zoom. So far, I'm trying to think back on the council meetings. I think everybody has either, because we do the hybrid, which means we have some counselors that are
Right.
in the room or on Zoom. So, and I think one of the things is we do roll call votes instead of voting by hand. We have to do a verbal
Right.
call from.
Right.
So,
Well, and then the follow-up to that is if the emergency declaration goes away, does the state, what the state put in place still apply?
I don't believe so, but I can double check on that. I think
Okay.
once the emergency proclamation is taken away, I think you'll find that we go back, I don't mean to put it this way, but probably business as usual, where we do have the meetings that in chambers. I do know that some of the counselors would like to see some of the meetings to continue meeting live, like on Zoom, or so I'm not sure if there's going to be some changes down the road locally, or maybe even at the state level. I know that some of the representatives are talking about still this way. So
Yeah, because if if the proclamation goes away, I guess it kind of begs the question, would the council be required to be live and in person? And is the hybrid just to facilitate public participation?
no, I think if the proclamation goes away, then we would be able to have people in chambers like we normally had prior
Right.
to the pandemic.
Oh, yeah, but I guess the question, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. So would the council then have the
Oh.
option to be present live or present via Zoom?
That's
You
a good
know,
question.
yeah.
Yeah. I'd have to ask about that. Yeah, that is a
Yeah.
good question. Yeah.
Now, is that a new question that we should add to the list of questions? I think it
Yeah.
is.
I think we
Yeah,
want to
I
document,
mean, I
yeah.
think it merits a discussion. Nick, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, I think at least, document it. And that way, if we need to do a little research on something, we have the time, and maybe at the next subcommittee meeting, we can bring that one back up.
So do we think it's in connection with the 210? So it would stay with this subcommittee?
I do.
Okay. All right. So would it be worth, just for the protocol, you submitting that as a question, Alison, that we can then tie into the tracker and everything that way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and just so I'm clear with process here, so I should put it on the tracker?
No,
I should put,
I'll manage the tracker.
okay.
Better than so far.
No, listen, I'm happy to have you do it.
Can I ask a question or make a suggestion?
Of course.
Is there a way that we could put a date that these were discussed on or added? Like she's going to add, Allison's going to add or we're going to add the question that she posed today. Can we put a date that was added to the tracker? I mean, that way for me, it kind of jogs my memory that it was on today's date that we
I
did.
think that's a great suggestion.
So is it the date it was discussed or the date it was proposed, or?
Well, it would be the day that it was proposed, and we were discussing it, so.
Okay.
And then I think in the future, any that we get from like the public, that probably wouldn't hurt either, is just to document the dates that we did receive this information.
So Nick, are you the keeper of the master of the tracker?
I think I'll have to be, yeah. It's probably Liam and I in coordination.
Okay.
Okay.
Mike, as a quick note of process here, and I'm sorry when I stepped away, I missed it. Did we vote on your first comment?
No, we didn't vote on either of those.
Okay.
I think
No,
we
there's
should.
no vote on that one.
I think we should, so we can move on. Does somebody have a motion?
I'll make a motion to table the comment 1.
Okay. I'll second that.
Okay, Allison Bristol,
Yes,
Nick McGee?
Yes.
Thank you. Mike Stevenson?
Yes.
Okay. And then on comment 2,
So comment 2 was reference here as to what defines a quorum and or reference to where it resides in document. Simply by stating all members of council, and then a comment that says only the final passage.
I think the if I may, Mike, I think the language is clear that as is written.
I think so.
I'll make a motion to defeat comment 2, or table comment 2, sorry.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Allison Bristol,
yes,
Nick McGee,
Yes.
Mike Stevenson?
Yes.
Thank you.
211, vacancies. If a seat on the town council becomes vacant for more than 6 months prior to the next regular town election, the vacancy shall be filled for the unexpired term by a special election held within 60 days from the date the vacancy occurred. If a seat on the town council becomes vacant within 6 months prior to the next regular town election, the vacancy may, at the option of the town council, be filled for the unexpired term by a special election. However, no election shall be held within 60 days. And there was 2 comments here, one from me, which was, just about every committee has alternates. Have we thought about it for town council and school board? And then the second comment from Mary was related really to the timing of it. Is the 60-day requirement state law? Is it a different timeline for pulling and submission of papers? And how would it all happen in only 60 days? Usually that process takes about 90 days. I have no idea.
Okay, so it is in conjunction with state law, and there is a clause in the charter in that when there's a special election, the town council can set the timeline for nomination papers and the date that an election is held. I believe that it's only 25 signatures that individuals have to get, and it doesn't take an individual that long. I've had people come in the same day they've taken them out and submitted papers for council. I'm trying to think. So the council does have the right to adjust the timeline for papers to be taken out, and it can happen within a short period of time. Now I'm trying to think of the other one. We've never had discussions with regards to alternates on either board or council. I don't know of other communities in Maine that have them, or even in other states.
Yes, Nick.
Yeah, so as far as alternates go, my major concern would be is how are they either appointed or elected? So you'd essentially be expanding the number of council members and then coming up with, to say 9, and then coming up with a mechanism by which 2 are designated as the alternates, whether they're the lowest 2 vote getters out of the elected or. Yeah. So I think, I don't think we need the alternates on the elected side of it. I mean, I think it's a good thought to have backup so you don't go through that election process, but at the same time, people may have changed their votes based on maybe, if there's a different set of people that are running in one election versus, a special election, they really favored somebody in one race and not so much, but they checked all 3 boxes because they got the 3 vote, you know what I mean? So I think the alternates get a little tricky is how I would say it.
I'm not sure I'd particularly thought it through. It just seemed as I'm thinking about all those committees, they invariably do have them, but I hadn't given some thought to the fact that it's an elected position rather than a vote, rather than an internal position. Do we have many vacancies? historically?
The
No,
terms that have,
council. Right.
yeah, boards and committees, yes, but for the council, there's only a handful where a term is not been completed, and we've had special elections.
John Cloutier, he came on in
Yes,
special
he's the
election.
last one. Yeah. We don't have a lot of them, either on the board or the town council.
I had it's kind of related to this. It was part of my comments. I'll put it on the radar, and I don't intend to make everyone discuss it now. But my thought on this was trying to avoid a situation where somebody was in the last year of their term, saying they're resigning at the 7-month mark, which thereby triggers the mechanism to force a special election, and whereby that person is seated for a period of 2 months tops, and then they're forced to run in a general election. So you're asking somebody to run twice in like a 2 to 3 month period, which I can understand. You want to fill a vacancy if that vacancy might be longer than the last year of their term. But if somebody was getting termed out 7 months later, is it worthwhile to have that special meeting? I mean, that special election, knowing in 2 months it's getting filled by a regular term election anyway. So I'm not asking us to dissect that today, but that was one of the comments I had kind of come up with was, is it worth the time and expense and money to fill a vacancy if they're in a last term?
I mean, there's a process for within the last 6 months that the town council can decide not to. I mean, I wonder if maybe that number should be changed, because I think your scenario, 7 months, that then turns into just 2 or 3 months that they're going to be on the council before they're having to go to re-election.
Right.
If I could, there have been in a couple of situations where on the council, and then I'm going back, way back, where we had individuals that waited and submitted their resignation in that 6-month period. They knew that we were going to be required to have a special election, so they waited until the time frame that we had.
They did you the courtesy there, is what
they
you're saying.
did the courtesy, right. And I'm
right.
not. There's only one other time where we did have to hold a special election, and that was because of an illness that they.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking just in case of a death. I mean, it could happen where they don't have the option of extending you that courtesy of holding off to the 6-month mark.
True.
So. But anyways, again, I don't want to dive too deep into it without it being on the agenda for, but that was one of my thoughts. It was related to this, that's all.
So shall we take a motion on the 2 points that we've got? The first one was mine about alternates.
I'll make a motion to table the alternates.
I'll second it.
Allison Bristow?
Yes.
Nick McGee?
Yes.
Mike Stevenson?
Yes.
And then number 2 was the Mary Starr question.
Yeah, which is one it sounds to me like it's covered with state law, the first piece. Yeah. And then I guess it makes all the other points moot.
I agree. I'll motion to table.
I'll second.
Okay, Allison Bristow?
Yes.
Nick McGee?
Yes.
Mike Stevenson?
Yes.
Thank you.
212, rules of procedure, semicolon, journal. The town council shall determine its own rules and order of business. It shall keep a written record of its proceedings, and the record shall be open to public inspection. This was yours, Allison.
Yes, well, my thought there was, do we want to require a visual or a video record of proceedings that are also available to public inspection? Which I think is, just even beyond council. Like I know long range planning has started to tape and keep their committee meetings. I think it's very important, especially if you want to have the public engaged.
All our meetings and documents are public record, so
But I guess that what I'm saying here is we want to add language that it's not just a written record. It's also, videoed or however it would be expressed so people have access to actually watch the meeting. I know they do now, but it's just not expressed that way here.
I believe in the council rules, it says that their meetings will be televised and recorded for rebroadcast at a later date. And I think I mentioned earlier, the rules and policies, I believe, are going to bring that up with regards to all the other committees, because as you indicated, what happens after the emergency proclamation has been removed by the governor. And I know that Councillor Gleistein is going to be bringing that forward with regards to having meetings taped to be broadcast later.
So do we want to take that language, which is much better than the way I expressed it, and add it to section 212? Or propose adding it to section 212?
It makes sense to me. What do you think, Tony? Is that?
Well, I believe that the council already has that capability of doing that. They have their own rules of order. And then we also have 302B, which is the committee and boards manual. And I believe that is what they're going to be looking at in order to incorporate the recordings of meetings. So they already have the capability of making those changes. I don't know if you want it in the charter when it's already, the council already has that ability to do by making adjustments to 302B.
I just think it's to have it in the charter. I don't want to say it overrides that, but if for some reason the council ever decided not to do that, it would be a mandate for them to do it if it were in the charter.
Okay.
Maybe I'm overthinking it.
Nick?
I would just say I like, necessity is the mother of all invention. I like the fact that I can go back through and watch ordinance committee or planning board or long range play. I mean, on YouTube, it's kind of cool. I mean, minutes do a great job of documenting the business votes, but not all the discussion all the time. So it is nice to have that record available. And I'll say kudos to the town hall for figuring out a kind of a nice format for each committee meeting, be able to scroll through old recordings. I think that's great. Do we need to codify it in the charter? That's a good question, because now are we, or if you do want it codified in the charter, how do we best codify it? Which is general language saying the town council shall take all reasonable steps to have meetings recorded and available on internet for and not really try to prescribe the methodology, but maybe just a general statement saying the town council is responsible for making sure that there's a recorded housing of recorded meetings available to the public. Just super general like that, and let them dictate whether the platform is YouTube or 5 years from now, if YouTube goes away, there's another platform they could use. So maybe not be so prescriptive with it, just charge them with that ability or that task.
The other piece that is the retention of records that are from state law. Right now, I believe we only have to keep our recordings that we have currently for 5 years. So where YouTube is, like you said, Nick, if they change the media format. So.
Yeah. So even that 5-year threshold, you look at it and say, a meeting such as this, where in 10 years, there'll be another charter committee meeting and somebody says, hey, what did they talk about at the last charter committee meeting? And those videos are gone. So I don't know if we want to prescribe that it's, housed in perpetuity, although most everything on the internet is. But I would say that it might be worth just general language saying that there's an expectation of the council to make arrangements for, visual recordings and audio and housing of their meetings or of town meetings.
Allison?
And I think you could also put in the caveat in accordance with state law. I
Yeah.
think just from my own experience, it's when it's current is when it's important. Say if an ordinance is under discussion, and to be able to follow it from, when it's first introduced at committee all the way up through, the second reading council. I think that's probably when most people would want the opportunity to pay attention to it. Another thought that bubbles up from the conversation, and I don't know if this is an appropriate place to say this or add this, but can we also say here, the town council and council committees? Because there are, like ordinance is a council committee, and I know there's 3 or 4 more that are solely made up of council members. So do we also want to ask for, that to be recorded?
My thought is yes, although this one is dealing specifically with the town council. And I think, based on, comments from you two guys, I'm thinking some real simple words can be added to this this single sentence, which would not make it overly complicated, but at least would have it appear in the charter instead of just in the town council rules. Something along the lines of, and any recording, any associated recording, because obviously if there is no recording, then there's nothing to save. But if there is a recording, it should be saved.
Well, there should be a recording.
Right.
I like Tody's language about, what's in the council rules. It was very short and sweet. Tody, do you want to share that again?
It's all council meetings, both regular and special, whenever possible, will be televised and rebroadcast for a later date. That's in the council rules.
Yeah. So if we just added in accordance with state statutes, and are the statutes, state statutes, is that part of the emergency proclamation, or is that just normal?
Well, currently, the way we're doing our meetings is because of the emergency proclamation that's in place.
Right. But I think we want to say, that it's not just in an emergency situation, that it's just is that they're televised and
why don't I work on some verbiage and then I can send it out to you?
Okay.
How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Nick?
Thank you.
Yeah, quick thing here. There was a word I thought could be added to the language Tody said that I was missing. The word retained wasn't there. It was recorded and broadcast at a later date. I think the word retained would be important. And the second point I would make is, as it relates to aligning with state law, we always need to keep in mind the state law is usually your minimum. And so if the state law says you keep this for 5 years, and perfect example is this charter committee, somebody wanted to go review our tapes, the town could say, well, we wiped those out 5 years ago. We were only required by state law to keep those for 5 years, and therefore we didn't. So the town or municipality, we can use a baseline of state law and guidance, but if we expect them to be retained for a longer period of time, I think we should specifically spell that out. So if we have a higher expectation than what state law allows here, we need to be careful to make sure that is explained through whatever language we're trying to push. Make sense?
Yep. So is there a motion there that we take this to full committee? But in the meantime, Tody's going to come up with some wording. Nick?
If I may, could we try to do the wordsmithing in between meetings at the next subcommittee meeting? We look at adopting the language that we get comfortable with, and then that's what is recommended to the full committee.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It does.
So could I make a motion to table this until the next subcommittee meeting for review of specific language?
Okay. Gotcha. Just need a second.
Second,
Okay. All right. So Allison,
yes.
Nick McGee,
Yes.
and Mike Stevenson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess this brings us to almost the 1 hour point. Do we need to look at public comment at this point, Toady? Is anybody on?
We have nobody in attendance. There's no one.
Okay. So we do have a continuing agenda. What I'll do is I'll grab those questions and statements from you, Nick, and incorporate them into the tracker. I'll update the tracker with what we've concluded today. So we have a continuing agenda, and we have a meeting date of
18th.
the 18th at 9 a.m. Is that still good for everyone?
Yes,
I am double checking at this moment, but I believe so. 18th at 9 a.m. Yes, I can make that work.
Okay. We don't have any other business on the agenda, but any other business before we adjourn?
I'll just make a quick comment. I think this worked out very well so far. And,
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear from Toady and if the other committees are having such great success.
Actually, I haven't watched the other one. I
Okay.
will this afternoon, but I haven't watched the first one that was yesterday. Yeah. I heard that it went well.
I fully intended to, and still do intend to jump on some of them, but I was especially hoping to be able to do the first one just to gauge how they handled it so that we could, either replicate it if it went well or be aware of pitfalls if it didn't. But certainly I think that there are some points that are burning issues for me that I think are before the full committee. So I don't need to jump on any of them specifically to lobby for any of my thoughts, because as we've seen on reflection and discussion, we're shooting them down, which is fine. I think those thoughts are there to be considered by everybody. So I'd like to thank everybody. I will get working on updating the tracker. Sorry for leaving your stuff out, Nick. It was definitely not intentional. And I guess we'll see everybody on the next full committee.
Can I just ask Nick, can I get an agenda from you for the next
Yes,
meeting?
I have it in the works. Yes.
All right,
I'll
perfect.
send that over to you today.
Okay. So do a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second,
Okay, Allison Bristol,
yes.
Nick McGee,
Yes.
and Mike Stevenson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Take
Awesome.
care.
Thank you,
Enjoy your day.
everyone.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Very much. Have a great